All right, all right, all right, all right. Thank you so much for everyone who's tuning in or going to tune in. Thank you so much. I am really appreciate my special guest for today, Dr. Richard Templeton. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it.
Well, it's my
Um,
pleasure.
yes, yes, we're going to dive into it. We said we're going to stick to an hour, and I tend to be long-winded sometimes. So, if you can and will, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on board. And I just retired as a psychiatrist, practicing 46 years here where I'm from, in Annapolis, Maryland. And I did my undergraduate at Penn, my medical school at Georgetown, did a little time at Harvard. Michigan was my residency, a little time in England, Oxford, London. And I'm living where I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. Um, so that's pretty much my curricula vitae. And I did a general practice of psychiatry for 46 years here in Annapolis, and someone took over my practice, and I'm fully retired, but have lots of projects, and one of them is looking at men and their role in the negative things that have happened in history, and happen every day. And that's an area of interest to you too, I know. And so look forward to some discussion about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you reaching out and all that, and I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. I do want to say hello to some people. Hello to Blue Sapphire. Hello to Rhonda Payne. Hello to NW. Hello to Yoli, who I believe is in, where you at? Sudan? Somewhere in Africa, I think. And yes, hit the like button, and hello to Sassy Red. So I definitely want to get into it as far as what we're going to be discussing here. Before we do that, if you could tell us, you told me an interesting story about how you came across me. Could you tell us? It's Guyana. Yoli's in Guyana. Thank you so much for checking us out. Told me an interesting story about how you found me. Could you tell the
Yeah.
audience there how you found me?
Well, some years ago, when I put my website together, I used Fiverr, and Fiverr has specialists who are ranked and 5-star people who can do a lot of things, but one of them is they can provide you for a very little price influencers lists. So I went after, I gave connected with a guy who had very good ratings, and he's very interactive, and I said I wanted to see if I could identify influencers in the topic of toxic masculinity or anger management, and came up with 100 names, their email, their names, their Instagram, their YouTubes. And I wanted emails because I wanted to send a personal letter rather than something else to these people. And so, it turned out, it was worth it. I got probably 10 or 15 responses. Many of them, of the listing, really didn't pertain, I think, to my targeted audience, but still, it's very cheap and very quick.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I'm glad I'm making some kind of influence, or somebody can find me out there. So I appreciate that. Hello to you, Deborah Hutchison, as well. All right, so we're going to dig into it. So you sent me, when you came across my information here, you sent me this website, which I'm going to put on the screen here, and this is from, actually I meant to this is called Bad Behavior. I'll put this in the comments section here as well.
Actually, I trademarked those words. Bad male behavior belonged to me.
Okay, all right.
I haven't put a trademark symbol on it, but I went through the patent and trademark process. It costs about $300 or $400, but
Okay.
And the logo and the color and the whole bit.
Okay. So this is your website.
Yeah, I had this website. It was put together by somebody initially through Fiverr, Pakistani or someone. I can't remember. And you give them the images, you give them the ideas, and then someone else reshaped it here at this end. And this is my website.
So as you can see here, it says bad male behavior, world's #1 problem, and there's an about section, the male problem. I went through this a little bit, not a full extensive deep dive, but I did read a couple of blogs.
The blog topics, there hasn't been much interaction with it. It's really a website designed to be a resource and just to raise awareness and be a resource, not necessarily for you know, conversations or chats. Um, Now,
Okay.
the genesis of this project, it's in the beginning there, you know, the originator, me. But for when I was 25 years old, I was in a conference and someone said to write down what you think's most important in life. What would you think you'd like to do? And I said I wanted to know the eminent people of all time, the good and great people of all time. Know of them. I don't necessarily know all about them, but if you're going to spend a life, you might as well know the people who are truly good and great. So I had a website I called Greats 2000 because there are truly fewer than 2,000 eminent people, good people, great people who have influenced the world in a positive way. And but for so many, and the whole idea was that if you could, you know, be like those people or be inspired by them, that you'd be a good person, you know, be like Rachel Carlson or Martin Luther King or you know, George Washington or anyway. So, but about 5 years ago, I realized that you know, in order to change the world, we need to deal with the bad people, the negative influences on the world. And that's where I said, you know, what is the biggest and most negative influence? And it happens to be us, the males. We have been the most negative influence. Now, I give credit to the fact, and your title for today's talk somewhere was, are males still a problem, or are males always been a problem? I think it's always been double-edged. You know, we have done great things, the male sex, and I'm not discounting women. Women are important over here too, but in terms of my focus, you know, they're working on themselves, we should be working on ourselves. But in terms of great things, certainly men have contributed enormously to the world's civilization. But in terms of the negative things, they rank certainly very high in negative impact on the world. And so that's where the idea of let's look at the bad part of us. Somebody questioned why do I use a negative, you know, project name? Because a lot of these people who are doing male stuff, you know, use positive words like the whole male or the good male. And well, I guess it's my medical training that, you know, I want to diagnose the problem. The problem is not the good part of men, it's the negative part of men. Okay. And so it comes partly, I guess, from a diagnostic framework of being a physician. But also I think it hits you, you know, right between the eyes. There's pulling no punches. It's our bad behavior. It's our not calling out our fellow males for their bad behavior. It's not our recognizing our biases and prejudice that's the problem. You know, we all have biases and prejudice. And I would say most every man exhibits some bad male behavior. Kick the dog, slam the door, tell someone to go to hell, you know, think negatively. Someone, I think Richard Pryor had a joke or something saying, there's always a good reason to knock an old man down the steps, but you don't do it. Well, men think about it, okay, but women don't even think about it. So we are different, men and women, but men have had the most negative impact. In fact, there's a guy named Matthew White who wrote a book called The Great Book of Horrible Human Events, and it's got another title now, Atrocities, and you know, he ranks them. But most of the negative human activity has been male caused. You know?
So I was looking through the site there. You said there was a definition. Now, forgive me if you mentioned this already. What are you defining as a bad male behavior? I mean, you trademarked it. What are you defining as that?
Well, actually, a couple of years ago, I was reading a little bit about Isaac Newton, a little short biography, and he didn't invent gravity, but he defined it.
What? He didn't what? He didn't invent it?
He didn't discover it. Let's say not discover. He didn't discover it. It's been talked about since the beginning of time, why things happen, why things fall down.
Right.
But he defined it and mathematically proved, you know, that the moon goes around the Earth because of, you know, mechanics, you know. And I said, well, what is it central about bad male behavior? And I came up with the notion that it's destructive self-interest. When you do something that is destructive and serves only you, that's not good. Now, you constructive public interest, there can be, you know, destructive public interest. You know, a war, justifiable war is something bad, but it also has good cause. But bad male behavior is anything that someone does. That applies to women too. I'm not discounting that they aren't sometimes responsible for negative things, but it's when you act in a destructive way that has no real public good or very little public good.
Mm.
You know,
Do you
when you
think that men are inherently um, selfish? You talk about self-interest causing destructive behavior. You think that men are inherently
I think I mean, these are generalizations, but I think men are more focused on I, me, what I want, where I want you to do, what I'm going to climb, what mountain I'm going to climb. They're more, about what they do. Women's self-esteem and identity revolves around caring, supporting, helping, and they're more about we. We can do something, not I'm going to do something. So I think that. Men by and large are oriented towards their own assertiveness, control, competition, um, degree aggressiveness, um, and they have less empathy for people at large. They say psychiatrists and psychologists are more like women because they care. They feel for people. They're empathic. All right. Your friend might wouldn't get upset if you called him out on his yelling at his wife, but if you touch his motorcycle, he's going to get really upset because he cares about that. But in terms of relationships, men, are historically or evolutionarily engineered to be capable of assertiveness or aggression when it's necessary. And in fact, you say, have men always been a problem? Well, we needed to protect ourselves. We needed to defend ourselves. We needed to look out for our tribe. Other negative males were trying to do things. So historically, we're stronger than women. So there's been an evolutionary script, that's created men who they are what they are like today, or have been throughout history. And of course, sociologically, men and women have, a baby has to be civilized. They don't come out, really caring and active. And but women are socialized to be caring, look out for other people, take care of babies, care for their girlfriends. Men are culturated to actually be more assertive, to say, be tough, be strong, don't cry, beat that guy in that game. There's a culture in growing up that supports men's being more assertive and actively competitive. And in that goes, of course, not feeling or caring so much. Men might be on the sidelines, saying, boy, I'm really upset about something. But, to their friends, they're not going to let down their guard. They're going to be tough, strong, I'll do that, risk-taking and assertive. I mean, so men have no problem walking outside at dark, walking down to 7-Eleven to pick up something at 11, buy alone at 11 at night. And Jackson Katz, who's sort of a poster boy for a lot of this stuff, he has people raise their hand, and all the men say, sure, I'll do that. Like, no problem. He asks the women, 1 or 2 hands go up. Why? Because they're afraid, of going outside because of men. Men create an environment where they don't feel comfortable, being alone or walking the streets. So I think we have a reputation historically, which is helpful, but it's also has a downside.
So you talked about the different characteristics, features of masculinity,
Right.
stronger, more assertive, or sometimes aggressive in certain
dominance, competitiveness, a small degree of lack of empathy. It's hard to kill someone or hurt somebody if you care about them. So it's helpful to be somewhat insensitive at certain times. But go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's something when I was in the police department. I don't know if you knew that.
I think you did some consulting and a lot of, or you actually were you a policeman? Or
yeah,
police?
so I do consulting now, but I was a police officer, and I used to talk about the lack of empathy that a lot of times that we have I think actually this is one of your blogs too. It kind of reminded me of it, but it's definitely true. Is that we tend to in all facets, particularly in
Mhm.
war, you tend to
Yeah.
otherize people. All right. Think about the negative pejoratives that we call people who are the Germans
Yes,
in
yes.
World War II, the Krauts, and the Japanese were another pejorative,
Mhm.
right? You have to do that type of thing
The
in
gooks,
order to be able to,
picks, right? Mhm.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So as police officers, right, we had to tell people not to do that, you know,
Right.
because we all have this negative word that we call people who were you know who are being arrested, and we try to put them in, and we don't realize we're doing it. Obviously it was my job to let you know you're doing this and to
Right.
stop doing that. We call them, some people would call them urchins and all these other different really negative pejoratives, but it was easier. It then becomes easier to arrest them, and then it becomes easier to use force. And of course, if you're going to use force, then the
Yeah.
next thing you know, the force goes excessive because they're not
Mhm.
seen as human anymore. Yeah.
Sure. No, you dehumanize him, and you develop a lack of empathy and become numb. Even in medical environments, there was for some years people felt that you shouldn't do an internal medical rotation because you get emergency room work wears you down. You become less sensitive, and so. But it's a tough battle to maintain sense, empathy and compassion and not see the other person as a thing, rather than another human being. And one of my favorite quotes is, um, "We're all the same the world around." That's one idea, but um, there was a minister in England in the 1600s who said, "But for the grace of God, there go I." He was watching a man go to the gallows. So having empathy for the other person is really one of the most beautiful human things. But we can lose that when we get constant bombardment with negative events and people who are, and the police, have a tough time. Almost every time I see one, I almost want to go up to them and say, thank you for being on our side. Really, you're not against us; you're for us. But the take on the police is always, nope, I'm not going to invite him to a party. Okay, I'm not going to, talk. What are you doing talking to the cop? Somebody says. Yeah. Anyway,
What's your thoughts about the term toxic masculinity? What's your thoughts about that?
well, it's catchy, and it does go to the idea of bad behavior, that men. I think it's a little too general. I think um, it's sort of a subset of male behavior. It's not the whole picture, but it tends to be, you know,
Well,
kind of,
that's what they're trying to paint us as, is
yeah.
that just to be man, just to be male, and
Mm.
to be some sort, yeah, male
It's
and
toxic. Mm.
is to be toxic, to show assertiveness is to be toxic. Not to get too over the top here, but I was reading some feminist post, and I don't mean that pejoratively. It was a
Sure.
feminist post, and it
Yeah.
was about just simply having an erection was a form of aggression. What? What? So what's I mean,
Well, I think there's healthy masculine, and a lot of the people out there who are promoting masculine um, issues, like to focus on the fact that men are men, and they should be confident. They should show courage. Can be stronger physically, mentally more resilient. Maybe, although I think that someone said once, women are psychologically more resilient, and so I think that the male traits don't have to be, demonized. There's normal male traits, and then there's toxic male traits. So, it's a spectrum. There are men who aren't very manly, or they're cowardly, and that may not be helpful when the community says, "Well, you ought to stand up for your neighbor. He's getting beat up." He says, "No, I'm not going there." So on that hand, so it runs the spectrum. So, but the word toxic masculinity, if it's painting all masculine behavior, all men as negative, there's a problem. I don't think so. I don't agree with that.
now, what do you brought up a good point about the cowardly male, right? I'm trying to get men to be the best version of themselves. And when you try to do that, when you talk about that, you tell them to go to the gym, you eat right, exercise,
Mhm.
get the emotional help and all this different type of stuff. But you brought
Sure.
up the word cowardly. What I mean, is it okay to not I'm talking about really cowardly, not just
I've never used that word until today.
well, but some people are like that. Some people will shrink down when confronted. Is it okay for a man to be that type of man?
Absolutely. I mean, I put it in context. I said, if your neighbor's getting, a lot of negative treatment in the community and you don't support him and kind of shrink away from being involved, I would say that's not a good coward. That's not a good way to be. And it's a shame that you don't have more, willingness to come forward. But I think being a coward is something that all people would find negative, I think, in certain situations. So you have to put it in context. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I definitely got you. It has to be in certain context, but I think that we agree that there's
okay. There are men who are, passive and quiet and poetic and timid and shy. I mean, that's okay.
I agree. I definitely agree.
There's nothing wrong with being a shy guy.
There's nothing wrong with being shy and timid, but there is something wrong with being a coward when push comes to shove. Nobody wants that from anyone, right? Women don't want that in a mate.
I think
men don't want that. If there's something going on, you want you to help out, right?
Definitely. So I think that all humans ought to rise to the occasion and not be afraid to address something that's important, that most people would say, if your son is, being scolded by your neighbor, and your wife says, "Honey, why don't you go over and tell her to stop, telling Billy, our son, he's a bad boy." That's not really good. Oh, I don't want to get involved. That's, where he should, to be a good parent, you should do that. You should go over and rescue your child and just don't let him have contact with a neighbor who takes it upon themselves to criticize him when it's not merited. And women likewise. I think that being a coward can be, because it's Wizard of Oz, the lion.
Yeah. So is this bad male behavior, is it socialized or is it biological? Where do you stand on that?
Well, if you look at the website, just if you pull it up again, it's a combination. It's biological. I think men tend to be a little more hardwired to be assertive, aggressive, a little more active. It's developmentally and socially in childhood, created. In your teens, you have peer groups and groups of people who are, kind of share a culture that's, you got to be tough, you got to be BMOC on campus, you got to don't talk to her, she's a jerk or something, and you have a feeling that you have to be part of the group that influence you. So there's a social, developmental, psychological, and then there's cultural. A lot of people who are dealing with these issues say our culture promotes, aggressiveness and male behavior. You have movies about people getting their heads cut off, or Chinese jitsu, people being shot. I heard a talk on aggression 40 years ago, and he said if the number of people who got killed on Miami Vice actually occurred, half the country would be dead in a year. They're pulling out the gun, shooting all these people. It's not reality. And he also quoted about police officers. He says, we get the idea that police officers are pulling out their weapons, and actually using them, like the Old West. He says the actual statistic is once in the 30 years does, on average, does a police officer actually pull out his weapon and, shoot it. So we have this idea of our culture being, toxic, and media promotes some of this too. You've got to be, cool. You got to be bad. And somehow that's supposed to be positive, but it's not.
This is kind of a trick question here. Have you looked into? We talk about culture. Have you dealt with or worked with African American males or minority populations? Have you worked with them?
Well, my practice, I saw a lot of African Americans and males. Can't say that I focused on their issues per se, but Yeah, I have some let's say life experiences and clinical experience. What questions do you have about that?
Well, just about the culture. We talk about the reinforcing
Oh,
effects of
yeah,
culture.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think I just read a really terrific book by Giovanni Janelle Giovanni, Jivani. He's an African American who just became a member of the House, member of Parliament or the House, I guess, in Canada. He's only like 37 years old, and he wrote a terrific book called "Why Men," something like that. And it's the whole story of um, why male use or something like that. And it's the story of these individuals who end up in crime. Why do these young people, young adults, um, end up in criminal tracks? And he was one of those. He was very close to buying a gun. His life, he couldn't get to high school because he couldn't read, so he had to really study. He went to a college, I think York College in Pennsylvania or wherever it is, and he got inspired. He went to law school at Yale, and then he's actually he traveled and worked with groups all over the world. And then he's just recently become a member of the House in Canada. Very, very dynamic guy. And he feels the central problem is the absence of the father in Black communities. Particularly he's looked at all different, jihadists and all kinds of different young groups, why they gravitate to crime. And many of them don't have the structure, the discipline, the role model of a man in the home. And in the absence of that, you might have a woman, or maybe used to have the church or something that helped out, but a lot of them, are wrestling with who they are and what they are about, and they, identify with a group that gives them some purpose, gives them some self-esteem, gives them some, something to feel good about. And unfortunately, it leads him in the wrong way. And he feels the best thing to do, if we could, is to give them career opportunities, educate them, get them involved in trade, get them involved in something they're talented at, to give them alternative and to mentor them, like boys and girls clubs and things like that, where you can actually, these kids usually don't have a significant male figure. And quite often they have to play out this role of being tough or joining the negative group. And they're not academic always. So, the school idea is not so keen on them, but they do have talents and they can be identified. But it seemed to him that was a really big part of it. Poverty plays a part. Racism plays a part. Of course, being in an urban environment which is negative and not not at all supportive. Those are all elements. But not having a good role model in your teens seems to be pretty important.
You talked about the boys club, and I grew up going to the boys club. What's your thoughts about male only spaces, boys clubs just for boys? Now it's integrated boys and girls clubs. Do you think that, we're talking about mentorship, do you think that men need their own spaces in order to develop?
I don't think, they could find that within that group. I don't think you have to go outside the group. So I don't know how these collective male boys clubs, girls clubs work these days, but you can find a male mentor, you can find a female mentor. You're being exposed. I went to an all boys school, high school, and the one thing is we didn't have much distractions, and it somehow is, I think, more suited for keeping on focus than having girls around. But I think it's healthier to have an exposure to both sexes, and so I'm sure somebody's researched boys and girls clubs. And it could be they're broadening out because they need more membership, or they want to grow their agenda or their program. But male only, it's good to a point. But I think you need to deal with the other, and that's the other sex.
I wanna highlight a comment here. Some women are not used to seeing healthy men, and some have endured trauma from other men. Now they look at them in a weird way, but men are different.
Well, I think men deserve the reputation they're getting for being bad. All they have to do is be good, and you'll be fine. That a woman, even if she distrusts men because she's been in a bad relationship, you can understand it. Totally understandable. But if a man wants to be appreciated, respected, they have to earn it. They have to act well. They can't be, telling terrible jokes one minute and turn around and want some woman who just heard it, expect them to be friendly and interested, So men will get what they deserve, and they need to improve their act. We are the problem.
So that brings me back to the question about male-only spaces, right? I think that, and again, is this biological or is it cultural, right? So we're in, and I always bring this up because, I was in a very male.
30. At 30% biochemical, biological. We're more assertive, we're stronger. We got all those. Testosterone plays a little role, but not. Developmental. Social, interpersonal, growing up. That's a third. Coming out of a traumatic background, serial killers don't come from positive families. Those are the worst extreme, and most of them are men too. And then you've got the culture, the social cultural context, the environment that either pulls you out of a negative spiral or connects you with some life course that makes you appreciate other people and treat them right. But go ahead.
No, I think you kind of answered a little bit. So it's the 30 thing. And so, you are there, this is why I ask about the male only spaces. Are there times where men need to be around men to act like men, to tell the dirty jokes and all this? And then also at the same time, should they be socialized and also, don't talk this way around women, control yourself, control your urges, control your whatever. And in those male spaces, also a controlling aspect to it, to say, here's what a healthy man looks like. Is it realistic to say we're not going to ever tell jokes? And
I think the jokes is kind of let's forget that for a second. But there are a number of wonderful organizations out there that are supportive of men, and supportive of their finding themselves, finding good self-esteem, finding their talent, and the bonding of males is good. Bonding of women is good. Women have girlfriends, and men should have boyfriends, or male friends, and I think that provides a wonderful source of feeling good, feeling valid, feeling worthwhile, and that goes a long way to not having an attitude or not being critical or being defensive or feeling shy. And so, those organizations, I think you still shouldn't treat your fellow humans poorly. Okay. If you're over here doing this one day and this on the other day, you ought to be pretty straight through good, rather than, sometimes good most of the time, but bad, really bad other times. So,
can a man who grew up without the mentors turn into a positive person? You talked about the man from Canada who's now part of their parliament, or whatever they're called. If you know them, I don't want to trick you.
Jamil Javani, Jamil Jamil Javani, Jivani, and the book's on the tip of my tongue. It's like Why Young Men, I think, is the name of the book. Why Young Men, and it's a terrific read, and it's recent, and it really makes you appreciate what we're talking about in terms of how men from different cultures, not only the African American culture, but yes, I think it's possible, not to have a relationship. I mean, just talking about Oprah Winfrey, she was abused, sexually abused. Her mother was terrible, and she gravitated to books as her salvation, and her books were her lifeline, and that's why she's so interested in books. So one can retreat to a book, or can become a poet, or can go sailing solo or something. But I think you need to deal with your fellow man, and I think healthy people generally develop and need relationships with other people. You can't live in a vacuum. There are a few monks out there and a few recluses, but they still
right.
Have...
So the term there that you use is healthy, and I don't want to paint a picture. I know that you're not, of that just being male or engaging in horseplay or something like that is inherently bad or inherently evil. And I think
It's
that
it's a matter
try
of
to make
degree.
that, yeah. I think people try to make those correlations that over, and that's why I talk about the dirty jokes or the horseplay or the teasing or not even what's the other term there? The hazing, things
Oh,
like that.
yeah,
Can't be
that's
taken
negative.
too far. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you can hand wrestle, but when you turn around and beat up a girl, that's not good.
Right,
You know,
right, right, right,
but
right.
I think all people, and even the people who do it, know that it's not good, that it's wrong. They know what's right, they know what's wrong, and they have to become aware of the fact that their behavior is not acceptable, and they have to develop an awareness of that and check their own behavior. And we need to check other men's behavior. So if a friend of mine slammed the door on his girlfriend or his wife, inappropriately, I wouldn't call him on it right there, but I'd step aside after she goes inside, says, Bill, that really wasn't called for. She didn't deserve that. And if it happens again, I say, Bill, I just not going to stand for your treatment of your wife. It's just not appropriate. And if it continues, unfortunately, we can't be friends because it's bad. And I'm going to call you on it. And Jackson Katz and other people call it the bystander syndrome. When you stand by and see someone else doing something that's not right or appropriate, and you do nothing, you remain silent. When somebody's telling really crude jokes, in a gathering, and somebody says, "Bill, just knock it off. That's really off color, totally inappropriate." And there's some nice people here; they don't want to hear your mouth. If you don't call them on it, you may not want to do it in public, but you take them aside and say, knock it off. I like you a lot, but that's not good.
I definitely agree with you that that it
Mhm.
takes strong men. That's the mentorship process, to
Mhm.
strong men to say, "Hey, listen, we're not going to tolerate that type of behavior. Don't
Yeah.
don't embarrass them." But I certainly agree with that.
Somebody
Um,
said the best way to raise a child is to love abundantly and discipline constructively.
mm,
So you say, Billy, I really love you. You're a terrific guy, but you know what you just did to your sister is just not okay. So you don't want to just criticize. If you raise a child with negative scolding or negative treatment, they're going to come away feeling negative. You've got to give them positive feelings. You've got to make them feel that they're okay, mostly okay, and there are things though that they could work on. The
I
same
went to
thing.
I went to a high school basketball game last night, and the coach, coaches are coaching. They get he
See
got
that?
upset.
They
He
say
got up.
giving him a pass. You're giving him a pass while you're saying, "Oh, he's just an asshole," right?
No,
Or,
no, no, no. I'm definitely agree with. I agree with you. I am wholeheartedly agreeing
and
with you.
parents ought to stand up and say, Coach, we love you to death. You do a great job with our kids, but knock off the
Right.
negative comments.
Right, 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 right. No, I 100% agree. I mean, it was not my high school, wasn't my kid or anything like that. I'm just kind of just going as a
What's your
favor to a
experience? What
friend.
happened?
But I'm noticing this behavior, and of course, being where I am mentally and just seeing this, I'm like, man, this. And I coached as well. I didn't coach high school, but I coached, like 13,
Mhm.
14-year-olds in our police activity league. So I'm
Right,
recognizing how this guy's talking to his kids.
right.
And he's doing it right, he's in earshot. I can hear exactly what he's saying. I'm like, this is terrible. The
Yeah.
way he's talking to these kids is terrible.
He's
It's
browbeating them and he's saying, "You guys are nothing. You're not whatever." It's all, you know,
yeah,
it works to a degree. I mean, it does get results when you have somebody who's in fear and has been browbeaten. They may perform better, and so it's not a trade-off. But I think that kind of treatment is not appropriate. And you can say something negative to somebody. It's how you say it and how you package it. Say, you guys are doing a hell of a job hanging in there, but golly, pull your weight. Let's get going, you guys. You're slacking, or something like that. And rather than say you're a pile of shit, and what are you doing out here being playing? I'm embarrassed by you. That's not helpful. The kid's going to quit the team or be damaged, traumatized, and that'll stay with him. My son
and
went
so
out with sports, and he got some treatment like that, and he said, "No, I'm not going to put up with this browbeating. I don't need this."
yeah, yeah. So that's where men have to check their aggressiveness, to what High Vibe's point is. her basketball coach was a mini Bobby Knight, and we were a girls team, and not one parent stood up and said something. So, right, so you got to control and I coached boys and girls at one time, and I was coaching the softball team and the baseball team at the same time. So I couldn't talk to the girls, the softball team, the way I talked to the boys. So I had to recognize that, you know.
You
But
could say they're sissies or little pansies. Come on, girls, get your asses in gear.
Yeah. You know, so yeah, it takes that. So we got to be able to, develop that maturity to understand when this is going on and to check that type of aggression in ourselves.
I don't think most of us don't even see it. We don't see our biases. We don't see ourselves as others see us. The famous, Robert Burns quote from his poem. So yeah, getting feedback, and you bring it to. Oh, well, did I say that? Whew, that's not good. I tell off-color jokes sometimes, or not off-color joke, or say something inappropriate. It's like somebody's short, and I might be, and he takes it lightly, but it's not helpful. And for my wife to say, Richard, sometimes you say the stupidest things. Okay, and that comes back to you, and it's good feedback.
Well, that's a good point, though. Whether you see it yourself, whether you are self-reflective enough to see yourself, or can you take constructive criticism when it's being pointed out to you?
Both. That's why you got to package it. But if you're in a cultural group that supports that kind of behavior, you got a little gang, but you guys stand on the porch on the steps or something, and some fat guy comes along. You say, "Boy, you fat, chunk of lard," and everyone giggles and say, "Hey, yeah." They kind of get feeling like they're powerful or important by being critical. But it takes a lot of guts for someone to say, "Look, knock it off. He's overweight, but you shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this." It's tough when you've got a gang of guys who hang out, and then they start focusing on you. "What do you mean, you sissy? We can do what we want to." You get a lot of negative feedback. So you got to be strong and you got to leave that group. One of the things is don't, participate in groups that support that kind of culture. You've got to have the guts to leave, but you're tied into it, and you got to have an alternative. You got to have somebody else to spend time with. But go ahead.
No. That's good stuff. It's definitely good stuff. Matter of fact, I teach a criminology course right now, and that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about why kids join gangs, and exactly what you said is about mentorship. Having alternatives to that gang, and all that. So that's all very confirmatory. Also, I want to get your thoughts about President Trump and his effect or influence on men. You've probably heard of the manosphere, things along those lines. What are your thoughts about them voting for him in mass, and what are your thoughts about what he can do to their psyche, positive or negative?
Well, Gerald Post, someone I knew, and I went to a number of his lectures. He's our CIA personality czar. He was a full professor at George Washington University in psychiatry and political science, and he was called on by the CIA and other government agencies to analyze world leaders. What are these people like? What does this terrorist note mean? How can we deal with this? And he died during COVID, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But just before he died, he published a book with someone else called Dangerous Charisma. Dangerous Charisma. That's the name of the book. And it's a story of Donald Trump, his family, his associates. It's a terrific insight. We all know he's a narcissistic person. And of course, there's healthy narcissism, which is feeling good about yourself, and it's not a problem. It's not pathological. Then there's pathological narcissism, where, you're self-centered to the degree that you don't care, or you require the people to, laud you, so to speak, or you boast. Coming back to the query about you're saying Don Trump and people gravitating to him, I think he appeals to a large white contingency who feel disenfranchised, or feel angry, or feel like they should get more, and they generally tend to be less educated, because they just fall for his, Kool-Aid. His he says, I'll make you strong again. I'll make America. You got to be someone. I'll take care of you. They gravitate to a figure that they can identify with and they feel empowered by. So that it's a terrible dynamic which has happened since the beginning of time, where someone like a Hitler or somebody rallies great forces around them and then uses it destructively. But the people who come on board feel good because they feel like they're part of a movement, they have an identity, they have a goal, they have a focus of their grievances. And so I think he capitalized on that aspect of a lot of men, and there are women who, but the women tend to look at what he's going to do more than how he behaves, I think. So they give him a pass on his bad behavior, whereas the men, are emboldened by his bad behavior. And so they give, and they feel like, oh, government's too big, let's drain the swamp, and so anyway, that's what I see happening. And he's surrounded himself with people who kind of are emboldened by his personality and his way of dealing with things. Terrific denial of his person as a negative force.
Yeah. If you know the numbers, being a psychiatrist and all,
Right.
How many men that came to you that you had to prescribe medication in order to tamp down their aggressiveness or whatever?
Well, the reason for someone being overly aggressive, impulsive, or irritable or angry, there may be some gabapentin, which is a mood stabilizer, but any anxiety medication that's not addictive. If somebody has a real irritable syndrome, anger usually comes from other reasons, so if you're depressed and frustrated, or you've got attention deficit disorder and it's hard to focus and you're overloaded in your or you're in an environment where you're over your head, or you have a negative boss, there are causes for being irritable, negative, having anger problems, or you're raised by a negative environment. A lot of people react to other people in their world because they see them as their negative parent, or their abusive father, or their and so when they get criticized or constructively or appropriately, called on at work, they take an attitude towards the boss or the manager because they see him as an authority figure who's criticizing them. And so they're replaying an old tape, an old relationship. And that's where counseling comes in, and being able to develop your own self-esteem and say, George, the guy's a jerk. You're not as bad as you're not at all bad. So leave that job, get away from that negative guy. That's the solution. And your anger would be less, and you're going to catch yourself maybe better. So
do you
some
think
people have bipolar problems, manic depressive problems, or neurotic anxiety? They're really intense or anxious and maybe sensitive. But I didn't do a lot of anger management patients. A lot of them don't come to counseling because they don't see counselors as a positive thing. They see it as a threatening thing, or they live with it. But life is therapy. I mean, you get fired a few times for talking back to the boss. You stop talking back to the boss. You still think it, and you might badmouth him, but you're going to keep your job. So you tend to get better at life. The edges tend to get worn off a little bit.
Very good. Thank you for that. I want to kind of wrap up here. What would you say to men who are struggling? Obviously, we talked about a lot, from being overly timid to anger issues, to what resources would you have to men? What would you say to them in order to improve themselves? As you said, men deserve the reputation that they have. How do we overcome this reputation in mass and individually? What would you say?
Yeah, to get the respect that you deserve and you can earn. Obviously, in individual counseling, as psychiatrists do that to learn about themselves and to get yourself out of the relationship, so you don't interpret things personally. You have emotional distance to do counseling, psychotherapy, what have you, and but that's a good thing if you can afford it or you have the time to do it. But a group is really helpful. Group therapy, I think, is probably the most effective, positive. You get feedback from all around the room. You develop a sense of well-being. You've got support. And a men's group, whether it's a church or in the community or working on projects, or working at the Y or working at girls and boys clubs. I think that can go a long way to developing a feeling of worthiness, and that and allows you the supportive relationships that you really need in order to feel good and feel better, and then grow out of your negativity or your self-esteem problems. And that doesn't cost anything. You could just join a civic organization, but you don't have to commit yourself. Keep it simple. You don't want to get locked into things. But once you develop some friendships there, you can see that there are a lot of men just like you, and that you're not that different. And that's true of all people. It's not until they start talking to someone who says, "Oh, you get depressed too? Oh, golly, I thought I was the only one." But I think a support group, through some activity that you enjoy, sports can be positive, But whatever your activity interests are, joining a small group and developing friendships would be a really useful way to just grow and mature and develop a better feeling about yourself and treat your fellow man better. Mm-hmm.
Last question, I think here. So there's a couple of questions. Black Man is Fair is kind of alluding to this in his questions here is we're talking about positive reinforcements and all that.
Sure.
Mentorships and all that. What role does a woman play in making the man, whether it's a mother raising a son, whether it's a girlfriend encouraging in the manosphere? There's a kind of this talk about using men as male proxy violence. I'm going to get my brother to come beat you up. I'm going to get my cousins to beat you up or something or shoot you or whatever.
That's not a very good woman, okay? Because she's exhibiting some negative behavior.
Okay.
But I think women have an important role, but I think men can't depend on them. But they do need their support. A man likes to be told, "Golly, thanks for helping me. The lawn looks great," or I appreciate you taking Billy for the afternoon so I can work. So I think all people need, and men need to express the same thing towards a wife rather than just take it for granted, that she's working in the home and maybe not working outside. So I think women play a role, as do women for women. And I think women are more supportive. They're actually more verbal in sharing their positive feelings about somebody else's activities or person. But men need to do that to men. Of course, men are short on being congratulatory. Say, "Bill, I really liked spending time with you today. That sounds a little feminine," rather than, let's go knock a few, balls down the hill. Yeah. But men should give more positive regard to each other, and women need to do it to men. But men can't depend on that. They have to, and but they do like to be appreciated, even though they might have a tough guy front.
Yeah, and I think that's important because you said men can't depend on that. So a lot of times, we do things and we cut the grass and we change the oil, we do this, and we don't get that congratulatory.
Well, you can ask for it. Say, "What do you think?" Says, "Oh, down Lawrence, I failed to tell you the grass looks really good. I appreciate you doing it." Now, if she's already got a negative attitude, then it's unfortunate. But you've got to push through that, and you can ask for support. You can ask for recognition. But he says, "Oh, you think that's a lot of work? You should see what I do." Well, we both do a lot, honey. Can we work together rather than fight over it? So.
Very good. Thank you so much. I want to keep this right to an hour here, so we're have any words to wrap up? I really appreciate it.
Well, I think we have to look at ourselves and not, fault women or fault society or fault. Yes, you might have come up in a bad situation, but you can, that's the past. You can do something in the future. don't use as an excuse to keep having a chip on your shoulder and acting negative. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. Just do the good thing and you'll get good respect.
Yeah. I question whether people really know it. Well, I'm not talking about mental illness, but I question whether some people don't have the ability to know. They don't have, if they grew up in toxic environments. And
I think there's some, people often say they don't know what normal is.
Right.
They think it's okay to yell at your girlfriend, because my dad yelled at my mother. You're right. I think that somebody's got to give them a reality check. And that's where the bystander syndrome comes in, or seeing someone else treat a woman, or asking women, what do you think? But you're right. I think they're accustomed, they're blind to it. And that's where you got to raise their awareness and point out, it's not going to get them very far if they keep it up. It's a negative route.
What are your thoughts for the future concerning male-female dynamics in relationship? You think we can improve, or you think it's going to improve? What do you think?
I think so. I think it's polarized somewhat now. There are people, one extreme, women said men are all bad, and men are saying I don't want to have anything to do with women, and
it's bad. It's bad.
They're driving me crazy, but it's, you have control over your craziness, if you stop and think of it. It's not women that are bad. It's us looking at us needing to earn our good reputation.
All right. Well, I'm going to put your link up here again, so people can go up here and check out the website. And I don't know if you have a subscription, but just read through the blogs and all that. And hopefully, maybe some people will reach out to you if they have any questions or whatever. And I know you're retired right now, but I hope that you can refer them to get some help, whether it's psychological, psychiatric, or whatever.
Well, in your community, in your backyard, are things that could be helpful. It doesn't have to be. If you really got a lot of issues, then you need to see a counselor, and get assessed and figure out how much you have an anger problem and where is it from and how you could work on it. But there are supportive ways to find help and feel good that don't involve a clinician. And I appreciate the comments about thanking me, Rhonda, okay, and other people.
Yeah, so, it was a great conversation. I know about two groups of men. They call it Bible study groups, but they're just men just getting together and just talking, and they chop up the scriptures and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, but
whatever works.
I'd like to. I mean, it's good to find a group that's not necessarily a religious group, because some people shy away from that. But that's less common. Could be a book, reading books, or a social group. We're going to go, I don't know, take hikes together, or play tennis, or do something physical. Men like to do those things.
So you gave us two books to review. One is by Giovanni, or however he spells his name. I'll look for that. Yeah. Why Young Men, or something like that. Yeah. And the other one was Dangerous Charisma. So I'm going to try to check out those books. So. Yeah. You guys hit the like button on the video. Thank you so much for that, Lakeisha. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Templeton. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I really appreciate the conversation. Tomorrow is Thursday, and we will be doing another conversation with a life coach, V Mindful. I did an episode on her show. She's coming on my show to talk about women's perspective and lack of sex. So that'll be a good conversation there. So hit the like button, you guys. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Templeton for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. Don't hang up once I click off here. But I'll see you guys. Giovanni. That's that's
mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to check out his book. Man, I'm like 10 books in a hole here. So
that one really gave me a lot. I just read it recently, and it's pretty comprehensive and not hard to read, and it sort of, he has excellent ideas, and he's been there.
Yeah. Okay. Great information.
Thank you to all your fans. Okay, yeah, and your followers.
All right, guys. Take care. Much love and peace.
Thank you all.